Okay, so what are your thoughts on the TSP I fund and how it's increasing its exposure to more international stocks? And do you have an I fund in your portfolio? No, I don't. But don't view my response as any form of personalized financial advice. The FRTIB, which stands for Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board, they announced the benchmark changes to the TSP I fund and just the I fund alone, nothing to C fund, nothing to S fund or anything like that. The FRTIB is a federal agency that oversees and manages the TSP. So that's where I get all the news from as well. And you can check that out when you get a chance. MSCI stands for Morgan Stanley Capital International. It is a research firm that does all the stock risk, performance analysis, and index funds. They're going to be on CNBC every once in a while too. And when you look at the benchmark and it says MSCI, you know what, I'm just going to pull it up real quick. When you look at the benchmark and it says MSCI EAFE Index, which stands for Europe, Australia, and Asia, and Far East Index. And that means the TSP I fund was following that benchmark index and matching its performances. Okay. The FRTIB just announced that they're moving away from the MSCI EAFE Index to what's called the MSCI All Country, that's ACWI, All Country World Investable Market Index, but excluding the USA. Makes sense. It's an international fund. China and Hong Kong. It also makes sense. They don't want federal employees, government employees, military members to invest in Chinese stocks, right? Well, it makes sense to exclude market indexes in the US because it's an international fund. And excluding the indexes in China and Hong Kong, that makes sense, right? We talked about that. So let's see here. China happens to be our direct adversary, that too. So we have the C fund, which happens to be the core fund in the TSP that tracks the S&P 500 index, which is the 500 largest companies in the US. What this announcement by the TSP means is that the benchmark is expanding to more countries, more markets, and more diversification in the international index fund. They're most likely doing this because there have been several financial reports about emerging markets around the world. And I did a video on the rise and fall of the international index fund. So you should check that out on my channel when you get a chance. Not to mention the international index fund has been grossly underperforming the S&P 500 for about 2 decades now. But if you pay attention to some of the countries, Guyana, they just found some oil in their countries. So we consider that as an emerging market. Their economy is absolutely booming right now because of all the oil they found offshore. And right now, Venezuela is saying that that's ours. So they want to go to war with Guyana. And then the US is kind of getting in there. Could become a potential conflict in the future. Hopefully not. We have enough conflicts in the world right now. But that's one of the emerging markets, right? Brazil would be one of the emerging markets that we're seeing. Indonesia, they're definitely one of those markets that's emerging. So they're not at the developed stage yet. So like US is a developed country, right? Some other countries are not fully developed yet, but they're on the way there. That's why it's called emerging markets. So right now, the biggest difference is that the 800 companies, so prior was 800 large and mid-cap companies. And then the new one is going to track 5,000. That's a lot. That's almost like a total stock market index fund or the world total stock market index fund that we have. So like more than 5,000 large, medium, and small cap companies. Is this going to perform better than the current index? We don't know. I think we'll definitely be more exposed to the volatility if the small cap companies start to do better. Let's say if they start investing in Guyana and their market starts to develop even faster than before. I mean, that could be more investment returns in the future, right? We don't know that yet. Does this mean I'm going to add iFund to the portfolio? It's a possibility. It is a possibility. I do want to have more international exposure. It just hasn't made sense in a while because they have been underperforming the market. Let me pull up the, right here. There we go. So this is my TSP funds. If you go to my website at firesidechat.com/resources, I have TSP price tracker on the membership website, and it's free for you to use, okay? For the level 1 members. And if you want to be my private client, that would be level 2 membership. Then there would be separate fees, and you can go to firesidechat.com/coaching to find out your eligibility. But right here on the left side, this is the price so far year to date. C Fund has performed 9.5% return already. At one point, it was over 10.5%. So if you compare S Fund and I Fund right now, do you see that? I Fund is outperforming S Fund in 2024 by only a little bit, by like 0.3%, but they're about the same. So S Fund has performed 4.45%, and I fund has performed 4.8%. So I is international, S is small cap stock index fund, right? Yeah, you can forget about F fund. I'm not sure what's going on. F can probably stand for something else now. But G fund is performing about 1%. This is more like a risk, right? And exposure. If you want to be more exposed to international index fund, just do some research on and keep track of how that benchmark is doing, right? What I just talked about, the Morgan Stanley index fund, and see how they're doing. That's not bad. If you look at how iFund has performed in the last 15, 20 years, 4.81%, that is pretty good. So am I going to consider putting in iFund in the future? We'll see, okay? I'm a big believer in the US economy. I am. Some people may not be. That's okay too. But just, this is a really good question, and it just provides more exposure. To answer your original question, is to provide more exposure to the iFund to potentially gain more returns is what I'm thinking that the TSP is trying to do. But great question. Thank you.